Hello everyone, this is part 12 of my testimony and vlog about the GATE program and the deeper layers of the program. Today I want to talk more about the occult and the legacy of psychological warfare and Mkoften. Now, yesterday I briefly touched on Army Officer Michael Aquino, who was a known not good person. You can look him up. He, among other things, was also a practicing occultist of the questionable left-hand path, which refers to the idea that one pursues any and all means to achieve enlightenment, and that this dark pursuit of enlightenment leads to positive apotheosis. This is in my opinion, folly. But the inner workings of occult processes are not to be discussed openly. There's a reason why people do not share the details of the deeper layers of these programs, and why surface level and cursory views of the topics think that individuals who reference concepts such as initiation or journey through the abyss are being metaphoric or allegorical. I'm not going to be explaining that further. Back to Michael Aquino. In addition to being an expert in psychological warfare, Michael Aquino was also, as I said, a practicing occultist. And he was a part of a group called the Temple of Set. And what this is this was an occult group that really was, in my opinion, an intel front, because after MK Ultra was exposed in the 70s, it's my understanding that a lot of these agencies pivoted to shell companies, cults, and underground fronts. So, for example, a lot of famous occultists are affiliated with military intelligence. I'll give you a short list. Founder of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. There's reason to look into possible ties between him, naval intelligence, behavioral modification, and the organization he founded. You also have Aleister Crowley, ties to British intelligence. You also have the author of James Bond, Ian Fleming, ties to British intelligence. You also have Jack Parsons. He was a JPL engineer, famous occultist, weirdo, friend of Crowley, who was also a famous weirdo and occultist and affiliate of British Intel. It just so happens that I'm in a park that was a favorite of Mr. Parsons. I'm in the Park Elysian Park. You can actually look around. I'm in a quite strange little occult chair and little seating area here. Little known fact, this area is filled with underground tunnels that were LA Underground. Urban myth says were used by Parsons in his Babalon, he's called a Babalon working or some bullshit. That's the thing too about rituals and deeper layer occult shit. It doesn't actually matter what names you give this stuff. A lot of it's cursory. A lot of it's ontological. And the problem with ontology is that when you label something, you reduce it, you collapse its quantum state. So like, for example, I heard someone explain it like this. It's a perfect way to explain why ontology is a flawed methodology. If you take a wall, especially a stone wall, it's a lot more than just a wall. It's the history of all the energy that's interacted with that stone over time and space. So when you look at what you're looking at an energetic resonance of all of the collective history of what is called a wall. So yes, it is a wall. Functionally speaking, absolutely. But by the time you've collapsed it into the state of it just being a wall, the history and the texture, the patina, is all overlooked. And that's the flaw in ontology, and especially ontology-based methodology, and why it is not a suitable methodology to base psychological warfare on. So anyways, this brings me back to the idea that a lot of famous occultists were practicing a lot of practicing occultists who were famous were also well-known either intel agents, officers, or had ties to intel agencies. And this ties back into the idea of psychological warfare, because aside from the deeper esoteric layers in the unconscious mind and the quantum, what is ritual but really performative human culture? And you could make an argument that yes, these performative cultures may or may not have components to them that operate on deeper layers of reality. That's an aspect for another discussion. What is absolutely certain is that rituals have, since their inception, functioned as a way to manage and give narrative to society as a whole. And this is paralleled in the teachings and ideas in psychological warfare and mind war and the Gerasimov doctrine, because the idea is that you're not treating the enemy as a foreign state. These governments are treating their own civilians as potential enemies. And so what they're doing is the governments are busy engaging in ideological subversion of their own populations with these stated aims, as in the Mind War document and the Gerasimov doctrine, to try to basically gain the upper hand in what they're terming a new type of warfare. I think this is all ontological BS, to be honest with you. This is just people getting carried away, overly labeling stuff. But, you know, tomato, tomato, potato, potato. Anyways, Michael Aquino was with this organization called the Temple of Set, closely affiliated with the Church of Satan. Church of Satan also has ties to intel agencies. It's my belief personally that most of these were MK Ultra continuation programs operating under the guise of these cults. So for example, in the Temple of Set, there was a high ranking order within it called the Order of the Trapezoid, I think it was called. And there's a gentleman who was the head of this named Stephen. There was also another gentleman in the Temple of Set named Don, and this individual was heavily influenced by voodoo and the teachings of I think his name is Michael Bertial. Michael Bertial wrote this book that is a fusion of Gnostic occultism and voodoo, or in this case I'd call it hoodoo, because it's really like a white man's approximation of what he thinks voodoo is. And so that would, in my opinion, qualify as a Bakor, which is a practitioner of hoodoo that doesn't know what they're doing and doesn't have respect for the craft and doesn't actually have any business using it. And that ties into behavioral modification, because these exact methodologies were applied in laboratory settings to both assist in the development of neural warfare and in the range of possible tests that could be applied to human neurology to produce neural data sets of value to weapons makers and anomalous consciousness researchers. But also it was a dual function. These rituals could be used to infiltrate and subvert society, and also to be studied in a lab setting to see if they had additional value beyond just psychological warfare and performative tactics. And that is where you get to the legacy of Mkoften, because you see, Mkoften, as I understand it from personal lived experience, did not end when it was stated to have. It continued in successor programs, because there's great value, as I've demonstrated, in the fact that there's huge crossover between the occult and intel agencies in weaponizing the psychological warfare aspects of the occult. So for that reason alone, these agencies weren't going to put this aside, because aside from all the deeper layers, aside from all the actual esotericism, which again, as I've stated before, is oftentimes simply a map of the unconscious and how to manipulate it, aside from that, there is a performative aspect to ritual and esoteric practice that can be weaponized at societal scale, and has been. And so what you have to understand is that these individuals who are so outwardly sinister, and who are, such as Michael Aquino, were also engaged in ideological subversion of the very nation they claim to serve, and that was for the aims of essentially trying to install a more austere and draconian form of government by sowing a lot of chaos. And that's a good place to end this video today. I'm going to continue talking about esoterica, Mkoften, and voodoo more, but for right now, I think that this is a good segue to just explain a little bit more context about how MK Ultra and MK often converge with ritual practice in the context of psychological warfare. And this is a rich topic and can be continued on in another video. And I hope you have a good day. Thanks for watching.